Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this week's training on how to create breakthrough results for your clients. So this is going to be a free flow conversation where I'd love to know from all of you what you would like to get out of today's conversation. But from Kai and I's perspective, we would love to share with you what we believe is the difference that makes the difference when it comes to how do you actually create a deeper level of impact with your clients. What is the secret sauce? What is the understanding behind how you create greater impact with your clients? And not just quick fixes, not just little adjustments, but how do you make profoundly deep changes and shifts to not just your client's behavior, but to their whole sense of self, the whole entire sense of identity in their whole life. So I thought I'd start off today by saying one of the most important parts of our job as a coach is to support our clients to transform. Now, what does transform mean? Well, we're talking about transformational coaching. Transformational coaching is helping a client to shift the very foundation of how they see their reality. And so by shifting the way that they see their reality, their behavior naturally changes without needing to force it. Their habits start to change without needing effort. And when we go through this transformational process, life looks different. Even though everything on the outside might still be the same, life looks different and a client's experience is completely different on the inside. So what we're looking to do in this transformational conversation is understand, how do we create those shifts? How do we understand what's required to initiate that and to catalyze that for a client? And what can we do when we either get stuck or we don't know what to say? How do we orientate ourselves in a direction to create more consistent transformation? So first of all, I want to touch on the fundamental. And first of all, I want to check in to see if this is a valuable conversation. Is it valuable for you guys to explore how to create a deeper level of impact for your clients? I just first of all want to check in to see if this would be a valuable conversation to have. If this is something that is important to you, if you can see value in this. First of all, just let me know why would this be important to you? First of all, just to check in. I got a comment here from Heidi. I would love to learn how to help a client in areas I haven't yet had a real breakthrough in. Okay, perfect. So I can see there that one of the questions behind that is, how do you help a client have breakthroughs in the areas that you haven't yet had a breakthrough in? Which is a perfect question, something that all coaches go through. And we can certainly speak into that one. I think that's a really powerful one, because I know that that's a source of insecurity for a lot of coaches. If my client wants to get a particular result, but I haven't had that result myself, who am I to help my client get that kind of transformation? That's a very good question. In fact, I might even speak into that one. I might speak to that one. I'll speak to that one in a moment, but we'll hold that one. Before we get to that one, I think it's really important to position the two most fundamental understandings of what we're really helping our client experience. Number one, we're wanting to help our client experience their true self. We're wanting to help a client experience the deepest understanding of who they are before their thoughts and their ideas and their beliefs and all of their memory came along. So we want to give a client an opportunity to touch that deeper part of themselves. When they touch that deepest part of themselves, a whole entire lifetime of suffering or misunderstanding or insecurity can get washed away. So I think that's a really, really important first point, is we're wanting to hold space for clients so that they get a sense of their own divinity, of their own infinite potential, their own sense of they are pure consciousness, they are the essence of life, they are connected intimately to life. There is no separation between them and life. That's one of the most important things I think our job is as a coach at a transformational level. The second most important truth, you might call it, or understanding that I think is really important and we need to convey to our clients, is helping them wake up to the fact that their experience is being generated within them by them 100% of the time, using this creative energy that we call the principle of thought. And it's taking form in each and every moment. And it's creating this virtual reality simulation experience that we call life. And it's all an inside job. we are the ones that are creating our own experience. But sometimes it looks as if that experience is coming from out there. Sometimes it looks like our feelings are being caused by the situations and the circumstances of our lives. And sometimes we overlook that the experience is created from within us. Now, it might seem like a really, really simple, subtle, maybe obvious or maybe not obvious truth, but the only place that our experience can be generated is from within us. And that's the job of the principle of thought. The job of thought is to create a reality inside ourselves and to sell us on life out there is the cause of that experience. And so what we're looking to do as a transformational coach is help our clients come back into that realization of, it's an inside job. It's me that's doing the creating of my experience. It's me that's telling the story of my life. It's me that's actually adding the commentary. I'm adding the dialogue. I'm the one that's adding the feeling to life. It's not coming to me from life. I'm the one that's generating it. I'm the one that's adding it to life. And as soon as a client catches a glimpse of that, the whole entire problem, the outside story, the feeling of my feeling is coming from life. It's coming from the circumstances. It's coming from my bank account. It's coming from my partner. Those can fall away in an instant. So those are the fundamental, the two most powerful universal truths that as a coach we need to be aware of. Because if a client catches either one or two of them or both of them, then the whole entire problem can literally get sucked out of a client in a moment, and they have an insight, they have a moment of realization, they have a moment of clarity, and potentially something they might have been struggling with for their whole entire life is gone, either in an instant or in a couple of minutes, or potentially they turn up to the next coaching session and it's not there anymore. So that's really what we're aiming for as transformational coaches, is that deeper level of insight and realization. And that's what's going to do the heavy lifting. That is the universal power of insight. When a client sees what is really true, the illusion falls away, the problems subside, they dissolve or they get diminished. And that's the power of what we're working with. So those are the first, I believe, the most important universal truths that we're working with as a coach. Once we first of all, we need to understand that both of those are true for ourselves. And I don't just take my word for either of those. those two truths, they need to be experienced and they need to be felt inside you in order for you to know that they're true. So at the beginning, when I heard both of these, I conceptually understood them. And I thought, yeah, this sounds about right. But you've got to rigorously test it, and you need to have insights yourself to actually know that they are true for yourself. So that is a really important part of the journey, is having patience for those two truths to deepen within yourself, so that you know you're speaking from embodied wisdom rather than just parroting a memorized set of ideas, so to say. A question from Sarah here. Can you speak into what they have? Can you speak into when they have that insight, but then a month or two later, the old way of being creeps back in? So they know, but they're not living it. Yeah. So Sarah, what happens is people have an insight, we have a realization. And then after that insight, there is a period of integration that needs to happen. And so what happens is we might have built up a lifetime of habitual, you might call it habitual behavior. And so the insight's very clear that we need to do something differently. But there can be a period of integration where we now need to consciously rewire a lot of habits, right? So we are creatures of habit. We have evolved, over millennia to be programmable creatures. So a big part of after an insight lands, there is application, there is action required, there will be implementation. Absolutely, there can be other challenges that kick back in again. We might be in a low mood, so we might revert back to previous behavior because it's easier. There's a whole lot of reasons why we do that. So a big part of what we're doing here with coaching is we're supporting our client to have an insight, and then they've got to implement it. So if you have an insight, but there's no implementation, if you don't take responsibility for that insight, well, the insight is a realization that doesn't have any energy behind it. So the key here is part of our role as a coach is to support our client ongoingly to integrate that insight and to be responsible for that, to be accountable to that, to be able to deploy that into all the different parts of their life. And that's another part of the coaching journey. You might call that tasking, you might call that action, you might call that creating projects, you might call that accountability. That would be the part of the process that exists maybe outside of the session where the client is now taking action and they're being accountable and responsible to themselves. So that's kind of how I see that. And yes, there is complexity in every human. You know, when you're in a low mood, you potentially might revert back to a habit that you did 30 years ago for whatever reason, because you might go through some kind of deep, profound experience within yourself and you've reverted back to something. Like for example, from time to time, if I'm in a low mood, I sometimes have the habit of biting my nails, strangely. When I'm feeling really, really good, when I'm in a high mood, that's not something that I do. And so this is an example of when we're in a low mood, when we're in a triggered state, you might call it, when we perhaps lose our orientation, lose our connection. Yeah, there's all sorts of behaviors, there's all sorts of thought patterns that can reoccur that aren't necessarily in our highest good. So these are all parts of the integration process. Cool. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing some secret sauce in the moment. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you'll have an insight that lands for a client and that's it, job done. Like they will never ever do that thing again. One of the great examples that I heard from Michael Neal was he uses the example of when an insight lands, it's the equivalent of, imagine that you've been trying to wash your hands your whole life, but you didn't realize there was a cold tap, there's only just a hot tap. And so you're using the hot tap, and every time you go to wash your hands, you burn your hands. And you get really, really good at washing your hands really quickly, or you might put a towel over your hand, or you might turn the hot tap on and leave the water in there to sit for a while to cool down. So you haven't discovered the cold tap yet. So your life is built around this misunderstanding, and you've now built your life around this idea that, okay, I'm going to get burnt every time I'm going to wash my hands. Now, the moment you discover there's a cold tap, bingo. It doesn't make any sense to go back and use the hot tap anymore. Of course, you're going to go to the cold tap each time and you're going to wash your hands. So an insight like that is so profound and obvious, you would never go back to doing the alternative because it doesn't make sense to, because you've discovered a better way. But sometimes if you're in a low mood, or if you're in a triggered state, or if you're in a moment of chaos, sometimes it might look like a good idea to go back to that old behavior. But generally with something like a cold tap and a hot tap, absolutely, you're never going to go back to that hot tap ever again because it doesn't make sense. So that's really what's happening in the transformational coaching conversation, is when a client has an insight that's deep and profound, a lot of the time it won't make any sense to think the other way, because it's just not how a client sees their reality anymore. So I'll give you another example. For me now, in my relationship with my partner, I used to get quite triggered from time to time. We might be talking about something and I would get triggered. And in that moment of being triggered, I would shut down and I would withdraw. And I'd be feeling insecure, and I'd go quiet, and I'd feel like, oh, there's something that I don't feel right. And I'd feel ashamed of that. And I'd feel like, oh, something's gone wrong. And now when I get triggered, what I've realized is there's a way that I can manage that trigger. I can speak into that trigger. I know that my partner is willing to support me through that trigger. So I can actually now share that with my partner and say, hey, babe, I'm feeling a bit triggered right now. Can you give me a bit of a hand through this, because I'm feeling a bit insecure about this. And I now know that she's willing to support me through that, because I've now created an agreement with her. I've now created a beautiful support agreement with my partner, where I now don't have to go silent and withdraw and try and hide from that and pretend like I've got my shit together. I can just be very vulnerable and open and share that with her. So I've now learned that's now a much better way to go. Now, from time to time, if I'm super, super triggered and I'm really insecure, I might revert back to, oh, gee, I'm feeling really triggered. I don't know what to do here. Sometimes that happens because it's profoundly challenging experience. But most of the time now, I realize,
I can go in that direction and I know that I'm safe. And I know that my partner's going to respond to me. And I know that this is actually a far better way of behaving in my life. So, so that's what I've now discovered. Doesn't mean I will 100% of the time always go in that direction. But most of the time now I'm going in that direction because I know that that's a far better orientation, is to be open and to transparent and to express myself. So that's, I just wanted to share that as an example of when we have insights, we naturally have a greater tendency towards the new behavior, but we won't always do it, just depending on our experience and how we experience that in the moment is going to be different each time. So that's my take on that, Sarah. So I hope that sort of answers your question and gives a bit of an insight into why changes don't always stick 100% of the time, and why there might be some integration required and some accountability and some responsibility and ongoing change work. So I trust that helps. Kai, I'll hand it over to you. I'll put it down here.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Great insights, Chris. And I'm just curious for you guys that are here, present, and listening. What did you guys hear in that? Is there anything that you guys heard that was new? And also, are there any other questions that come up for you related to this or related to something else? And Heidi, I know you had a question that we can get to as well. That hasn't been answered yet, but anyone else have anything to share on this before we move on to what Heidi was curious about? Because we can definitely speak to that. And Robert said, I like what Chris was saying about rebounding from being triggered and not having to suffer in silence alone, being able to communicate this. Right? Yeah, there seems to be this idea that we have to listen to our feelings. Like when you have a feeling of, that doesn't feel good, that you have to pull away from it. It's not true. The feelings are just showing you what's going on in your thinking. They're not telling you about something in the situation. They're not even telling you about what you are or what's going on with you. It's just, what is the quality of thought that my awareness has become identified with in that moment? And that's why when a person reverts, if you can call it reverting, how I see it now is you just have a habit of thinking in a certain way. You have a habit of identifying with a certain kind of thinking. And when you identify with a certain kind of thinking that has maybe the goggles of resentment, those goggles don't feel too good. And so the feeling is just the indicator of the kind of goggles you wear. They don't tell you anything about you. The feeling doesn't mean anything aside from, I happen to be looking through resentful goggles in this moment, and that doesn't feel very good. So you can understand what your use of consciousness and thought is in the moment from the feeling. Am I using it in a way that's good for me? Am I using it in a way that makes me feel like shit? and that's all it really is showing you. It's just that difference of how you're using thought in the moment. So it's not good or bad. It's not like resentful thoughts are bad or happy thoughts are good. It's just a matter of, there's just an entire spectrum of experience that we can have here via thought. And our feeling shows us what we're choosing to experience on a deeper level, most likely unconscious. We're not often aware of that thought that we're experiencing and where it's coming from. But with this understanding, we can be sure, if we're really willing to like try it on as an experiment, try on this statement. 100% of the time, what I feel or what I experience is coming from thought, whether or not I can see it. If you just try that on as a 100% truth and just see how that goes through your day, it will start to correct the areas in which you have a misunderstanding that something outside of you is the cause of your experience. It'll just automatically correct, because it'll make you challenge your own thinking, your own beliefs about how life works. Well, why don't we move on to what Heidi was asking, which is, I'd love to learn how to help a client in areas I haven't yet had a real breakthrough. Okay, so this is, we're going to look at what the principles are really doing for a person and why it can be helpful for someone to have this conversation, transformational conversation, even if we're not an expert in the area that they're trying to get a result in. So essentially, when we're looking at the principles themselves, they're not specific to any line of thinking, right? So it's not like they have a specific boundary of business or personal development or relationship. Those are all breakdowns of categories of thought. So in reality, the segregation of our life doesn't really exist. So someone may want help with a relationship, or they might want help in their business, but they're not realizing that that's not a separate issue. You can't have a business issue and not have that kind of thinking that you apply to business show up and cause problems in other areas of your life. So a lot of people, they get too focused on the area that they want help with. And actually, they're not able to generalize enough how they're thinking, the way that they're thinking about life, to be able to have that breakthrough. And the principles, what they're really doing is they're looking at how we're creating our experience via thought. So how is it that we're thinking about any specific area of life that's causing us to have the experience that we're having? And depending on how we're thinking about it, if how we think about a given aspect of reality is different than the way that that aspect of reality works, then we won't intuitively do what works in that area. For example, I don't know if you've ever heard in NLP, they say the map is not the territory. What that's saying is it's just a representation. And what you think of as business or relationship, that's not what it really is. It's your representation. And what's that representation made of? It's only made of thought. Problem is, it's so real. That representation is so real that we believe it's reality. And when we're experiencing thought as reality, those are like glasses that you don't know you have. It's not like there's a specific place you can just take them off. It's a deeper level of the unconscious aspect of our awareness that is seeing through this filter. So what the principles do is they change the conversation from content. What's the content of my thinking? Let's look at business, or let's look at relationship, or let's look at finance, or let's look at some content. They're not interested in content, because your content and what you know to be true by using the content that you have is what's creating the problem. Like, for example, if someone had trauma, the content of that story and that experience that they're recalling in their memory, that actually is the source of their suffering. So exploring that is not actually going to resolve the issue. We have to explore something beyond that. We have to explore an aspect of ourselves that's before the experience of content of our thinking. And so the principles, they are a certain direction of conversation that helps people look before content of the thinking. And instead it shifts it to the fact that they're thinking. Like, would you believe me if I told you the only thing you had to do to get a different experience and result in your life was to realize that you're not experiencing reality, but in fact, you're experiencing thought? That every problem could be solved by that realization. And in fact, every problem is caused by that factor. That's the beauty of what we're talking about here. Is we're talking about a universal principle that applies to every specific area, because the universal means the whole, undivided, not separated. Creating a boundary is an illusion. Creating a boundary with thinking and saying, this is business, and this area of my life, that's not working. Well, the way that you're thinking and the way that you're understanding life, that's happening. And yes, it's applied to business, but it's happening before. It's happening in the deeper drivers of thought. And it's applying to everything in your life. For example, I'll give you an example here. One of the insights I've had recently was just from asking myself a simple question that I had asked before, but I hadn't quite seen it in this depth. So I'll get you guys to ask this. If money was a person, what would your relationship with that person be? So just type in the chat. I want to see what comes to mind. If money was a person, like, let's say it was a loved one, or let's say you were hoping that it was going to be a loved one. You were hoping it would become a romantic partner. But you were to really ask yourself now, what's my current relationship? Like, how do I treat it? How do I think of it? How do I relate to it? What comes up? how do I think it makes me feel? And how do I feel about it? All right. Robert says, insisting that it is friend zoning me when I treat it badly, when all it wants to do is love me and be close, and I'm making up stories about it, right? It wants you in the friend zone. So it doesn't really want to be in relationship with you, uh, even though you may want to be in relationship with it. And it does this when you treat it badly. Pender, neediness, glorifying money and thinking I'm not worthy of having it in abundance. So Tander, what do you need from it? What are you getting from money? If you think about it, what does it give you? And Robert said, yeah, I think it wants me in the friend zone. Yeah, but it wants to be in my life, but I'm thinking I'm not worthy, so I'm pushing it away. Heidi, I think I will be a silent partner to money. There's not much communication going on there, not much checking in. Yeah, you guys aren't having a regular conversation, so drifting apart maybe. Yeah, have you ever asked money what it wants from you? This just came to mind just now. I've never done it either. What if we just asked money, if it was a person, what would it need from us to feel closer and to want to be around us more? Let's reflect on this together. This is the first time I'm doing this too, so it's really a pure exploration. I have no idea where it's going. You know, for me, what's coming up is just like, just be at peace with me. You know, don't be at war with me. Don't be in conflict with me. Just maintain the peace and trust me. Robert said it wants me to value myself more. Ask it how you would need to value yourself more. Yeah. We could ask it the question, how could I change to experience more of you? What would I need to change in order to experience more of you? How would I need to show up differently to get the most out of this time with you? For me, it's saying, just pay more attention to me. Pay more attention. And don't act like you're better than me, like you don't need me. It's so interesting. Such an interesting conversation. What else? Anyone else have anything coming to the conversation? And then I want to share some things about the relationship dynamics that we could have with money that might be in the way of it wanting to be in relationship with us. Anyone else want to share in the chat what's coming up about how you're currently treating money that is the cause of it not really wanting to be in a committed and love affair type relationship with you, be fully available to you. So what are some of the things that you do that push away money? You know, like if you're thinking about if it was like a lover, and like, you know, when you are arrogant, I'm really repulsed by you, you know, or if you, when you're like blaming me, I don't like being around you. When you're critical of me, I don't want to be around you. I just feel not good. You know, what are those things that you do? The way you treat money, how are you being with money that is repulsive to it? Ask, ask money, ask your wisdom. Yeah, Heidi, I'm disrespectful sometimes. Yeah. Is there something specific that kind of shows up for you, like that represents the disrespect, a certain attitude you take towards it, or a certain thought that you have, or maybe a feeling that you have towards it, or an action that you take with it, a way that you dispense it, or conduct it, or manage it? Well, here's one. I'm a little controlling with money. Sometimes I think about where the money needs to go before it's come into my account. I'm not really respecting its flow. Or sometimes I'll like say this part of this little bit of money is for this and that little bit of money is for that. And I'm not really like letting it kind of move where it wants to go in my space, in my um, yeah, in my control, in my management of. Anyone else have that going on? A little bit controlling? Could just be me. I'm a little bit control freaky on money. What happens to a partner when you get super controlling? If they're empowered, they will probably step away, take a step back and go, I don't want to enter into that dynamic, submission and dominance. If they're submissive and disempowered, they don't feel empowered, then they'll just submit to it. And then you have yourself a nice little slave that you tell what to do, and then they're obedient to you. And that's, you know, that's not very enjoyable. They'll find themselves in that dynamic 4 years later or 3 years later, and they'll say, what the hell was I doing in this abusive relationship? And I want to get out. Patty said, to expand upon the disrespect. I don't care. I don't spend time with it properly. Like it's always a one night stand. Yeah. Have you ever noticed how, like, when money comes in, your first thought is, how can I use you? What can I do with you? What can I pay? What can I buy? What can I get? How often do you just let it hang out with you? How often do you just hang out with some money in your account? Oftentimes, like as soon as it comes in, it's like, oh, now I can buy this, now I can buy that, now I can use you like this, use you like that. So most of the relationship that we have with money is on a what can you do for me basis. It's on a utilitarian tone. Tell me something. If you had a partner and you only gave it attention and appreciation and respect when it was doing something for you, when your partner was doing something for you, how do you think your partner would feel? Would they want to maintain that kind of a relationship where if they're not doing something for you, you could care less about them? Maybe they come and give you a massage. Oh, Thank you. That feels so good. Oh, I love it when you're around. Yeah, it feels so good. And then they stop. You're like, okay, um, I'm gonna do some stuff now. How long do you think that relationship would maintain itself? So that's kind of like important to notice how you are in relationship with money, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter how much service you can provide as a coach and how much value. If you're in an abusive dynamic with money, guess what? It's not, you can make $1 million and you're going to dispense 1,005,000. You're going to find a way to destroy that relationship, right? Because that's just the habit. That's just the way that you do the relationship with money. And that's an indication also of the relationship you have with yourself. Because this dynamic is not just apparent to money, believe it or not. It's not just that you do money that way. That's how you do relationship. No, but no, I love my partner. I love them. I don't think about using them at times. And exam, because you have an understanding of relationship. You have a certain concept of what relationship is. And that applies to everything. That applies to self, and that applies to anything that we could consider independent of self. And again, that's on a personal level, because on a personal level, you and I are different. You and I are not the same thing. On a universal level, we're exactly the same. So when you're looking at it from one perspective, there's nothing that's outside of myself. And when you're looking at it from another perspective, everything is different than me. Right? So you're in relationship to things. And the way that you do relationship, the way that you think about relationship, the way that you've created that construct of your model of relationship, that's how you treat everything. So the other thing that's interesting about money is we can sometimes be negligent towards it. So this will tell you a lot about your own relationship dynamics. Like you can apply this to any relationship that you have. If you understand how you are with money, I'll tell you how you are in your relationship with your partner. I will tell you exactly how you operate. If I can look at, if we can really get to the truth of your relationship with money, I will tell you how you treat your partner. Because there's only so many different ways that you could operate. But if you look at it like this, one way of operating is negligence, withdrawal, right? So we like to be at a distance to what we're relating to. We like to keep it, we don't really like to get too up close and personal. We don't want it to be in our face, bringing stuff to our attention, bothering us. We just rather kind of be separate from it, right? So that's one dynamic. You may fall into that category if you have a difficult time doing your taxes and kind of managing your finances and keeping an accounting and et cetera, et cetera. You may be more negligent. Then there's the other side, which is overbearing. Like you're constantly checking in. You're like, oh, what do I have in the bank? When's the next payment coming in? What's the next payment coming out? Da, da, da. And you're a little bit overprotective. Like you don't really trust money. And the other one is like, I don't really care about money. I could care less. You know, comes or goes, whatever. And then there's kind of the middle, which is healthy, which is, you know, checking in when needed and allowing it to come and bring things to your attention reminding you, hey, do you remember we have this bill to pay? Remember, I need to kind of move in this direction. Are you going to allow me to do that? Or are you going to cling on to me? You know, like how do we interact with it when we have awarenesses around money? Okay, there's a couple questions here. Hi, Kai, can you please explain how is my relationship with myself reflected in relationship with money? This is really concerning. Does that mean I don't respect myself? The way that you are in relationship with yourself is the only way you can be in relationship with anyone. So the relationship with yourself is the first relationship that you know. And all other relationships are an extension of that. For example, sometimes I am in meditation and I just feel this incredible, beautiful feeling. And I would say that that's me getting in tune with myself. And when that feeling is there, I get super creative. I have all sorts of insights and ideas. And instead of just sitting there and enjoying that feeling and like letting go of those ideas that come to mind, sometimes I take that idea that came from being in touch with myself. I go, okay, what can I do with this? I can create this program. I can do this. I can have that person. I can do this. I write it down. I disconnect with myself to use the idea, the insight that came from being in contact with myself. In the same way, sometimes I don't necessarily just appreciate just being with money. Like if I have $5,000 in the bank or $10,000 in the bank, I don't often just sit there and like, I'm gonna be with you. And I don't need anything from you. Don't need to do anything with you. Don't need to use you in any way. Just gonna be with you. Just like a person, like a partner. And you just enjoy their presence. And you just enjoy them for who they are. Can you enjoy the essence of them? So if you really look at how you are with money, which is a super fundamental relationship, right? That's a relationship with your survival on a most fundamental. It often shows you the deeper dynamics of how you are with yourself. And what I want to point out here is there's nothing wrong with any dynamic. So it's not useful to sit here and get mad at yourself or to feel ashamed that you are potentially disrespecting money or that you're a control freak when it comes to money or that you're critical. And the awareness itself is empowering and liberating. That's all this is about. It's not like a guilt fest. We're not sitting here trying to dwell on how shitty our relationships are. That's not the point. The point is just to look where we don't want to look. Why? Because that's where transformation happens. That's where real change occurs. Is if you can see something about yourself that you previously didn't see, then you're going to change. And that's why the conversation of like speaking about the true self that the principles has, it allows you to see aspects of the wholeness that you're not looking for, because you're stuck looking for the broken down pieces of where you aren't working well in business, or where you aren't working well in your health, or what's wrong with your relationships, or what's wrong. You can never find the whole by looking at the pieces. That's why the direction of the conversation that we're having in a transformational sense is different than a personal development or learning a skill set. Like, that's what personal development is doing. Increasing your capacity to do. Increasing your ability to be skillful in what you do. That's personal development. It's the person. But beyond all of that crap, which at the end of your life, what are you gonna have any use for it? If you're sitting on your deathbed, what use does what you can do have for you in that moment, right? In the real moment when things matter, when you're reflecting upon the life that you lived, your skill sets were just things that got you what you have, or allowed you to do what you did. But what's most important is who you became in the process. When you look back and you look at what's been important in your life, you're not going to be left with your skill sets. You're not going to be left with your material goods. You're not going to be left with even your relationships. Those have to go too. The only thing you're going to be left with is who you are. Who did you become? If that's the only important thing at the end of your life, what would happen if you made it the only important thing now? How would your life be different if you stopped waiting to be on your deathbed to make who you are the most important thing in your life, not what you do? If that shift happens, if you really understand that the beauty of life comes from who you're being in the moment, not what you're doing, then you'll look in a different direction and you'll find something that most people are too busy doing so many things miss. They're too busy playing the game of trying to develop themselves to realize that that's just a limited construction anyway. It's not who they really are. It's the limited application and expression in the moment that's needed, but it's not who they are. You're not what you do. I'm not a coach. I can coach, something I can do. I'm pretty good at it too, but I'm not that. And I know that. When I show up to a session, I'm not a coach. I'm not a father. I'm not a husband. I'm not a person. I'm just here with people, not trying to identify myself as something. And I'm just going to have a conversation with them from that place. And I'm free to put on any costume which is needed to be of service to them in that moment. I'm not limited to just being a coach. I have access to me because I have not identified myself as something specific. In the moment of showing up in this conversation right now, I'm not identified as something. So I can sense and I can speak to what's needed in the moment. I don't have my own set ideas of what I should be talking about right now. or what would make me look good, or what would be impressive, or what would be impactful even. That's what makes us a good coach. If we choose to put on that role and interact with clients and create a service that they find valuable, and then create a business in which we can exchange different currencies for that service. That's just one hat. And I put that on, but I have to show up to the session empty. Present. Unidentified, but engaged. Some more here. Sarah said, Heidi, I'm also concerned and having a real moment here. When I've been abundant with money, I've still felt in need of more, and like I didn't really earn or deserve what I already have from doing what I love. Shit. Likely explains why I find it easy to make money just in regular jobs and struggle to make it doing what I love. I have a deserving slash good enough issue. Also, think about how you relate to money. How do you treat it? Do you really believe that you can just be yourself and money will show up? Like in the course of the day, if you didn't do a bunch of stuff that you thought was money making activities, would money just show up? No. Yeah, I've been there too. I mean, and sometimes I still think that. I still get caught into this idea that it's what I can do for people that brings money into my life. But fundamentally, my relationship with money is first. It's even before I go into interaction with the business, with my business. You guys see that? That the relationship with money is actually prior to even operating a business. And depending on how you relate to money, that is a factor in how you operate your business. Here's how I used to think money worked. So the first instances of me getting money, and this could be a good exercise for you. It's just like, think about when was the first time you earned money, okay? You earned it, which is where the whole deserving conversation comes from. Maybe it was from your parents. Maybe it was that you had like a chores that you did, or you did like a little lemonade stand, and I don't know. Where did you first earn money? Because that's where you often associate the equation of how to get it. For me, where it first came was in piano festivals. I was like maybe 6 or 7, and I won a scholarship of like $50. That's a lot of money at that time for a kid. And I associated this whole story, what it meant, like how money comes in is I have to practice, put in a lot of hours and then get really good at something. And then I have to perform for the person who's a judge. And then they decide if I'm good enough to win. And then I'll get granted the scholarship when I win. That's such a complex relationship with money, hey? Like, what an equation. What's your guys' equation? I'm curious to know. What's your equation? Like, how do you get money? And I'm not talking about your job or your application of your life's purpose or your work, your life's work. I'm just talking about what's the equation in which you need to do A, B, and C in order for money to say yes, you can have me. Robert said, I need to do 4 to 5 hours of intense yoga to have money. Why is that? What is it that you get done in the yoga that then allows you to have money? That's not something you did when you were young, was it? So you can see, so he said, it makes me feel more stable and I'm more in control of my emotions. So you can see a correlation between being in control of your emotions and having money. Can you see a direct correlation? Like literally the time that money enters into your account, you can see that it's caused because you feel more stable and you're in control of your emotions. I'm not blaming my emotions on it. Can you give me an example, like a real world example of money appearing in your account because you weren't blaming your emotions on it? I just don't know how to track that. I wouldn't know how to track that myself. So I'm curious. When I'm more stable, then I'm able to deliver proposals more confidently and I'm not shaken by no. I don't know if it's just me, but I'm still not seeing a direct correlation. I see some inferences. I can't see that. I can't see like an example. Do you have a real world example? Oftentimes when you don't have a real world example, it's made up. Just so you guys know. If you can't think of an example, it's often made up. It's a good one to understand. But if you ask your clients like, my partner does this and that, he's being a jerk and he's there. Can you give me an example? Well, he said this. What did he say? Yeah, I don't know. He's just a jerk. Oh, often it's because there's a projection onto the situation, not like a real experience of the situation that's causing experience. Yeah, just sit with that because I just don't know. That's why I'm asking you the question, Robert. Heidi, it's been all over the place for me. Sometimes it's effortless and sometimes you need to create magic for it to show up. I don't understand how it works. It's ambiguous, like a mysterious relationship. When you made money, was there something that you thought you were being or doing? Yeah, Robert said, actually, money came into my account in the form of GST 2 days ago, even though I was in a low mood. Yeah, the GST payment doesn't know which mood you're going to be in. It definitely is not dependent on you being in a good mood. Like GST remittance payments, for those of you who receive payments from the government after taxes, they're not waiting for you to be in a good mood to get paid out. They don't know what mood you're in. So they don't really care. Sarah said, huh, the easiest money ever came to me when I was just being my whole and total self. Wow. Yeah. That's nice to know. Robert said that resonates too. By the way, is this an interesting exploration, guys? I don't want to be wasting your time. Like, I'm just curious if it's interesting to be looking at money through this kind of reflective and curious perspective of, what is my relationship to money? Robert says thumbs up. Because for me, it's just intriguing, you know? I'm not trying to get anything from this conversation, in the sense I'm not trying to figure something out. I'm not trying to arrive somewhere. I'm not trying to change how much money I have in the bank. I'm just getting curious. I'm getting curious about stuff that I'm not aware of. And I want you to see that this is how, if we conduct a conversation with someone, this is the space which doesn't have an expectation of them getting some insight or getting some results or getting somewhere. And it's not analytical. We're not analyzing our thoughts and our feelings and our thinking, and we're just questioning everything. That's one of the ways that you can show up and be supportive for your clients. And you don't have to know what's going on for them personally. You don't have to be an expert in finance to get curious about how someone thinks about money. Is this answering your question, Heidi, as I'm saying it? How do I work with clients if I'm not kind of an expert in what they're going through? This is how you get curious. You get curious about how their thinking looks. And what's the relationship to that thing that they're trying to fix or work on or get better? Oh, Sarah said, however, to keep it, there were a lot of conditions and some high stress. It didn't come without some help. What do you make of that, Sarah? That, getting it's really easy, but keeping it, there's stress. Has that mirrored your relationships? Like maybe the people you dated just kind of came out of nowhere, but keeping them, you felt like you had to do a lot of stuff, or maybe you felt like it was stressful and there was a lot of conditions. I'm curious if it relates. For Heidi, it comes when you don't expect it. So when you have expectations on money itself, like, hey, you need to come. I expect you to be here on the 2nd of August or something like that. Sarah said, no, this is weird. If I could run my money relationship how I run my personal relationship, I'd be the richest bitch in the world. Oh, Heidi said, interesting that the 2 areas I feel challenged in my coaching is relationships and money. I'll let you in on a secret, guys. If you understand your relationship with yourself and you get that into a healthy state, you're going to be able to help anyone in any area of life. If you understand relationships and you understand self, you can do any kind of coaching in any area and be successful, be impactful, because that is what's causing people to not have a good working relationship and dynamic in those areas of their life, are those 2 things. So that when I started studying relationships and getting into relationship work, I quickly saw how that is fundamental to how people live their life. Because it's not just relationship thinking like me and a partner, it's dynamics. We're talking about universal dynamics of how we create healthy partnerships with things that are external to self. And business is something that is separate than self. Like think about your business. And the same way, how do you treat it? For me, I kind of have expectations that it's just going to bring me money. But I don't always check in with it and ask it what it needs and listen to it. I don't always have a dialogue or a conversation with it. Maybe it wants me to do something slightly different. Maybe it wants me to do a post about some topic. Maybe, you can check in. Did you know that? Did you know that you can be your own source of business wisdom. If you learn how to check in and communicate with these things that you're in relationship with. Sarah said, I think for me, the highlight is self-belief and worthiness. Fix this with myself and fix this with money. Cool. So let's look at that if you were in a relationship. If you were in a relationship with a man and you kept thinking, oh, I don't deserve this person. I don't deserve this person. Oh, I don't deserve this person. I could see there being maybe two ways that you could go about that. You could overdo to try and make up for the feeling that you didn't deserve them. And you'd be like super girlfriend, right? Like always there. I'm taking care of this person. I'm giving them everything they need. I'm doing what they ask, and you know. Or you could be on the other side, which is like, what's the point? I don't deserve to be in this relationship. And you kind of withdraw. But both can come from a sense of a lack of worthiness. Even showing up and doing everything for your partner and like being a great partner, that can come from a sense of I'm not enough. Robert said, trusting money is coming out to me. Like, wouldn't it be interesting if you could have a conditionless relationship with money? Like it didn't need anything from you and you didn't need anything from it. Like you didn't even need to be worthy for it to like you. Wouldn't that be nice? There wasn't requirements. Like, do you know the requirements you place on yourself are the only requirements that you have in relationship? That's what drives the behavior. You place certain requirements. Oh, I have to be like this, otherwise the person's not going to love me. This is a deep rabbit hole too. How you get love, the conditions for you to be lovable. This is stuff that we dive into in relationship work. That's why it's powerful. Because it's not stuff that you necessarily go into with your business. Do you love yourself, Heidi? Maybe that's why your business isn't working. That's not something typically business consultants will look at. So there's areas you miss when you just segregate the coaching to one area and you don't actually allow you as a being to be coached. And that's another thing that we have to realize is that the results are not always linear. I understood this from Body Talk when I was healing. In Body Talk, we never approached a person from an authoritarian or a treatment protocol perspective. Okay, a doctor is the expert. They have the information and they're going to give you a certain treatment when you come in with certain symptoms. With Body Talk, what we did was we asked, what's the priority? So someone could come in with a shoulder pain, a frozen shoulder. Help someone with a frozen shoulder one time. They could come in with a frozen shoulder, which means they can't get their arm up past 30 degrees. It's locked. And if you go to a physiotherapist or you go to a chiropractor, most of the times they'll think it's a nerve issue in the neck, or they'll think it's a work issue. You're slouching at work. And they'll give you corrective postures and et cetera, et cetera. But I've done sessions for people where I've asked, what's the priority? And their big toe on the right foot shows up as the priority. And you're sitting there going, how is that big toe stopping the shoulder from moving? If you actually look at the body, it's just one thing. Like if I pull my finger long enough, it's going to pull on my shoulder. If I pull my toe hard enough, it has the ability to pull the shoulder. But we're sitting here analyzing everything in such a segregated way, but it's a shoulder. It's not the same as the toe, that's connected to the leg. They're separate. No, it's all the same thing. It's just one blob. But because we give it names, we think it's separate. It's just your life. Just because you call it business doesn't make it separate from your life. It's all just life. It's all just you and how you relate to it. It's not separate. You can't segregate it. How you do one thing is how you do everything. So that is an effective way to work with clients when you can't get breakthroughs, is zoom out. Look at them as a whole person. Don't stay focused in on their problem. That's just a symptom. That's not the cause, often. Is this resonating? Type in the chat something that's like interesting. Just share something that's interesting about this conversation, please. So I understand where we're at and what's going on inside of your guys' heads. Yeah, Heidi said, if I don't need money and money doesn't need me, why are we together? Exactly. If I can't use it and it can't use me, what's the point of being in a relationship? That is the basis of a utilitarian dynamic. Think about your child. I know you have daughters. What's the point in them being in your life if they can't do anything for you? There is no point. You just love them. You love them for who they are, not for what they can do for you or not for what they can get you. Right? You're not constantly thinking, boy, how can I use my daughter to get something today? Yeah. Maybe sometimes we are and we don't realize it. Like sometimes I understood that for my son, I was actually using his joy and his accomplishments as a source of pride and happiness for myself. I was taking credit for this boy, who he is. I was so proud. And then I realized, oh, that's not how it works. So you're right. When you say, if I don't need money and money doesn't need me, why are we together? Most people have relationships like that. They don't really have relationships where they really can just be with someone independent of something happening. In other words, it's probably difficult to just enjoy the company of money if that's the relationship you have with it. And this is something I've had some work to do as a man. I tended to think more kind of utilitarian, like how can I use this? How can I get this? It's a masculine way of thinking, this utilitarian thought process. And I had to really shift from a results-oriented perspective to a process-oriented experience of life. So that instead of, because sometimes when I get in a conversation with someone, I'm thinking, okay, what can we do together? I'm so creative that I can find something to create with that person, doesn't matter who they are. What can we do? What can we create? Sometimes if I just sit with them and I'm not finding something I can create, I can get bored and be like, oh, well, what's the point of me hanging out with this person? That's the problem, Kai. That's the problem. You can't just hang out with people. You have to do something. You have to make something happen. You have to create. That's a problem, no? Isn't that a problem? Does anyone not see that as a problem, that you can't enjoy just being with people when they can't give you something? You can only enjoy being with them when they can do something for you, you can do something for them. isn't that like, that's a lot of work and effort, because I constantly have to be doing and I constantly have to be creating in order to just enjoy the relationship. I can't just be myself, and they can't just be themselves, and we can't just hang out and be. We got to be doers. Got to be a doer, otherwise you don't have value in my life. Can anyone relate to like the just being that person or thinking like that? We got some doers in this room, no? Not beers. Think about in a relationship with your loved one, when they come to you with a problem. Do you jump into, all right, let's sort that out? Solve it mode, fix it mode. I'm gonna clear this shit up for you. I got skills. I'm a coach. I can't coach you technically because you're not my client. So I'm just gonna hang out and act like I'm not coaching you, but I'm sitting here thinking of ideas of things that you need to hear. Yeah, you see how subtle it is? You know, I experienced just actually being with my wife. Something fell away in the last 2 months. This need to be the helper, this need to be the savior, this need to be the coach, this need to be the person that impacts people and does stuff. And I just hung out with my wife one day and she shared something with me, and I didn't have any thoughts about what to fix and how to do it and how to change your thoughts and anything. And she told me after that conversation, she said, wow, thank you so much for just being there with me. I felt so supported. I was like, what? I wasn't doing anything. And then I realized, oh, that's the point. I'm more effective when I'm not doing stuff. I'm the most effective when I'm just being myself. That presence and awareness and attention that's not constantly thinking elsewhere and constantly planning ahead and not constantly trying to do a bunch of stuff in my head. That attention and that presence is the most effective way that I can show up and support someone and serve someone. I may not have to say a thing. Sometimes I may speak. Sometimes I may just have a question that comes to my mind that I'm curious about. But that level of ease in which I can just hang out and be with my wife, that's the same level of ease that I feel with all my clients now. And guess what? I'm more effective. It's bigger. The less I do for my clients, or the less I try and do, the more I actually support them. Yeah, Sarah's just saying, really love this. Thank you. It goes against our equation, because most of us have an equation on how to get love that was developed when we think about our relationship with our parents. Mine was to impress them. When I impressed my parents and I won competitions, they were proud of me. And that feeling of them being proud of me and me feeling like I got the credit was what I associated to the feeling of love. So if I didn't get the credit, or if I didn't get noticed and was being seen as this impressive person, I didn't feel like I was going to get love from that relationship. And oftentimes I would withdraw from those relationships because I would feel that I couldn't be loved in them. Exactly, Sarah. How to be a good person. That's exactly it. That's what gets loved, the good girl or the good boy. That's what makes you worthy of your parents' love. And that's what makes you worthy of your clients' recognition and your clients' desire to give you money, because money is love. That's what a lot of people don't know. money is the same frequency as love. But we have so many distorted ideas of what money is that we don't get to experience the actual vibration of what money really is. It's the frequency of love that supports, and the frequency of love that uplifts, and the frequency of love that is the energy that sustains life. And that's what money's made of. So it's not about falling in love with money, it's about understanding money is love. Money is just a representation of love. And your relationship with yourself and the dynamic of self-love is what determines the flow of money. We're over time. But that's a good place to leave it. What do you guys think? There'll be another opportunity to continue a conversation of this nature, and I'm sure it'll be one that you start having with yourself in the coming weeks. Probably different than what we expected with how to get breakthrough results with your clients. But if you don't have a good relationship with money, you're gonna unconsciously turn away clients. Yeah. We'll leave it there. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for being a part of this exploration of whatever happened today. And appreciate you guys for showing up. And we'll be doing another one in 2 weeks. I don't know exactly what the topic will be, but we'll be doing another one in 2 weeks. So please, if this is helpful, also feel free to invite some people who could benefit from these kinds of conversations. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful week.